Last month we saw 2 children take their own lives in young offenders institutions in the space of 2 weeks.
And within days was found hanging from a sheet tied to the
Adam
bars of
Rickwood
his window.
was just 14 years of age when he was found hanged.
In the last 10 years, 80 young people aged 21 and under have killed themselves in prison.
This is the report of an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of Ryan Clark. When Ryan was found hanging in his cell, he was 17 years old. I would like to offer my sincere sympathy to Ryan's family.
CCTV footage showed that on the day of his death, Jake was subject to verbal abuse and banging on his cell door.
15 weeks before Adam's death, another young man died at Brinsford in the same cell and using the same method.
This is the story of 3 young men who died behind bars.
So, Mum, if you're reading this, I'm not alive, because I can't cope in prison no more.
Told by the people who knew them best.
He knows what a grass is, and he knows what happens to grasses, and he knows what happens to people who go running to screws.
He didn't have the mind of the 17-year-old he were. He had the mind of like a young teenager.
It reveals how they died in the care of the state.
He was bullied that much, I think he was tortured. His mind was tortured. And he lost his life at the end of it.
We have systems in place to ensure we learn lessons from deaths in custody. That's what the Ministry of Justice has said.
The compelling evidence is the fact that the deaths continue to occur. More crucially, it's the pattern of deaths with worryingly familiar themes.
Jake Hardy is one of the 80 young people who've taken their own lives in prison in the last decade. He died in Hindley Young Offenders Institution when he was just 17.
Mummy's boy. It's my lad. Very handsome, but still a mummy's boy. Any trouble, he'd come running home to mummy. That one is a week before he went to prison. Jake were a follower, not a leader. If somebody said something to do it, Jake probably would. He couldn't tell right from wrong, really. But that is mental capacity, 6'4½", with a mental age of between 12 and 13 years old. That's Jake and his sister Samantha. I think he were about 14 there. That's Jake with his hair gel back. They were going to a Christmas party at church, I think. If he hadn't had his tablets, couldn't hold a limb still, he were all giddy. We used to call it Jake doing Wall of Death. As them motorbikes going round and round and round, that's how Jake wore. And he would say, Mum, I just want to be normal, Mum. That's how he saw himself. He wanted to be like the other lads. And of course he won't. And he just followed their lead and got himself into trouble. That's how it all started. They did know in primary school there was something the matter with him. I mean, I went to take him to speech therapist twice because he couldn't finish a word off. I had to take him to have his eyes tested because he thought that might be a problem. It wasn't till he got expelled at 12 from his senior school that they were diagnosed.
It was good to know they'd got ADHD and some were wrong, not just they were a naughty boy who liked to destroy everything, put his hands on and set fire to things.
What did they diagnose him with?
ADHD and conduct disorder, dyslexia, and mildly autistic.
Jake and my mum and my sister dancing in the kitchen. They were always dancing, weren't they?
That was a normal day, weren't they? There were nobody like him, no one. If he weren't out making something, he were taking something apart, weren't he?
Yeah, or annoying me. Normally annoying me, but taking my things and breaking it. And
I can remember one time he come racing that road in a wheelie bin. on top of Black Bin, just skidding down road.
He did a lot of things with Black Bins. He used it as a boat, didn't he? Down canal.
Yeah, bobbing down canal in the Black Bin. Abseiling out through his bedroom window, which is 20 foot off at the floor. And Jacob got a 4-inch piece of rope. 4-inch. I says, what are you doing, Duck? He says, I'm just trying abseiling down here, Mum. I says, oh, don't do that, Duck.
Not many understood him. The people that he were close to understood him, but if you were to meet him on the street, you'd not like... It'd be one that you'd look at me and you think, you prick.
I mean, if he'd got a great big scar on his head, they'd probably relate more to that, but Jake's was in his brain, his mental difficulties, and people just looked at Jake and thought, normal kid. He's a naughty, normal kid.
On the night of his 17th birthday, Jake and his friends were involved in a fight. Jake was charged with a fray and bailed to appear in court. Just 2 months later, he was in trouble again.
This girlfriend must have been special. She was older than him, though, and he adored her.
Jake's only 17, and he was madly in love with her, besotted by her.
And she ended it. Then he went back up to see her. And he had a knife in his hand, and he was going to stab himself if she wouldn't go back with him. And she pulled the knife out of his hand, and they had a row, and she phoned police. They were worried about going to court, and he started mutilating himself, cutting his face with anything he could get hold on. Clippers, nail clippers, scissors. And because they were already on bail for the affray, that's why they sent him to prison. The judge just said, I'm sentencing you to 4 months. And then Jake's last words that day were, Mum, help me, Mum. Mum, help me. He just walked away crying.
He was a right mess. Yeah, a right mess. Proper couldn't hold it in or anything, proper upset.
He did do wrong, and he did need punishing, but he wasn't necessarily forced to be sent to a normal prison, because Jake wasn't normal. Couldn't go to mainstream school. Why did they send him to a mainstream prison? Couldn't cope with it.
Three years before Jake, Adam Rushton killed himself in Brinsford Young Offenders Institution. He was 20.
Bobby, good girl. Aren't you a good girl?
3 days before his 7th birthday, we picked Adam up with all his worldly goods, which wasn't very much, and brought him home. And so this is where he grew up. It's where he played, where we tried to show him there was a better way of being. He seemed happy quickly to be here. We had adopted Chris about 6 years before, and that had gone really well. We were a very happy threesome, and adding to it just seemed like a really good idea. So we actually got in touch with our old social worker. She told us about our little boy. He and his twin brothers had been taken into care because his mum just couldn't cope with them, and they were concerned for their welfare.
I didn't know you were there,
What are you doing?
He's taking a picture of you with Christopher.
Have a look through it.
Whatever you see is what gets filmed.
I want to look up in the sky.
All right. Oh, my goodness.
This is Adam with his twin brothers before he came to live with us. Adam, even at that very young age, we learnt, had to help look after his baby brothers. They would be hungry, and there might be Weetabix in the house, but there'd be no milk. He would go outside and wander up and down the street and look for somebody's milk on the doorstep. So we soon came to realise that from a very early age, the only way Adam could survive was by taking things. And he was very busy, very active, always on the go, and mischievous. In school, he was very disruptive. He'd go to the toilet and flood the toilets or break something in the toilets. So he was very difficult. His behaviour was very challenging. He would have periods of bad behaviour, most often when he'd had a particularly nice day. You'd go to the seaside or you'd go and do something with them. And then you'd come home and his behaviour would deteriorate. And the only way we could ever really understand it or explain it was that this child didn't think he deserved to have anything nice or to do anything nice. As if he believed, I don't deserve this, I'm bad. He couldn't believe that he was lovable.
Like Jake, Adam was 12 years old when he was diagnosed with ADHD. He was given a place at a special boarding school.
Tregunnon Hall School was a private independent school. It was home from home. We could see hope, yeah, in abundance. For me, I'm not sure my husband would agree, but me being my mug ever half full, I was hopeful. At 15, I was, yes, that's my boy, gonna be okay. And that was suddenly taken away from us. He was suspended from school. We were asked to come and fetch him. His behaviour towards another child had been aggressive, and they would never have him back. He just wasn't allowed back to school. He went back to feeling, I'm just a load of rubbish, aren't I? What's the point? I might as well just do what I want to do.
Soon after Adam was expelled from school, he left home and went to live in a hostel in nearby Newtown. He was 16. It wasn't long before he started to get into trouble with the police.
He was good at stealing. He was good at it, and if he stole, he would be risen in the eyes of his new friends, who were not always very savoury. But these were people who would look up to him because he was good at something, because he'd been learning it from a very young age, how to take things to survive. So that's what he did.
Ryan Clark was just 17 when he killed himself in Wetherby Young Offenders Institution.
Ryan was the quiet one. Happy-go-lucky, I called him. He didn't cry, he didn't whinge. Timid, really timid. And very, very, very small as well, for his age.
Yeah, very small. We used to always call him little gnome.
Just tiny. But yeah.
Ryan, like Adam, was taken into care at an early age.
This is what we call Ryan's table. We light these candles at Christmas times, don't we? Birthdays. This one's myself, Ryan the smallest, Gino and Carl, his brothers. Got Ryan on there again. We sort of made a collage of bits and bobs before his ears were pinned back. I like to live surrounded by my pictures, because they weren't with me all the time. That were my safety net. They weren't here, but they were still around me. They were brought up in foster care because I was unable to look after myself through mental health problems. I suffer with bipolar, type 2. I'm actually now in remission. I think if I'd have been diagnosed a lot of years ago, the children would all be here. Things would have been different. They all went to the same foster carer. Ryan was the main one that was stable for the most of the time. Carl and Gino had both turned into little terrors, going to high school, so they left that placement. And I think that affected Ryan quite a lot because he'd grown up with his two siblings, and then to suddenly be the only one, I think that would have had a big impact on Ryan, especially with Gino leaving, because he was close with Gino.
Ryan started to get unsettled a bit, kind of getting distraught in the house and getting a bit angry. And he kind of come out of care around about 13, 14 and just started living in hostels around Leeds, getting into crime.
I think Ryan was desperate to belong, but I think because everybody was split up into Carl with one place, Gino another, me another place, I think he was torn between all of us, and then just started tagging with Gino. I think he thought Gino was the only one that sort of cared about him.
Who made this?
My little brother Gino, who's currently back in prison.
What's it made out of?
Matchsticks. If you can get a close-up through the window inside, you'll be able to see all inside them as well, matchsticks. He made these on his 3.5-year sentence.
So is he in prison at the moment?
He is, yeah. Currently serving, I think, a 2 or 3 year sentence.
And did Ryan look up to Gino?
Yeah, wanting to follow Gino into his footsteps.
Do you wish that he'd maybe followed your footsteps?
Not really. I wish he'd just followed his own footsteps and learnt his own way. So I want exactly the good boy myself.
The 12 months before Ryan went to prison, Ryan lived in a hostel. Not a very nice hostel. Starting to do street robberies with other people. He was addicted to amphetamines by then. Cannabis, MCAT.
It wasn't nice seeing him like that all. Where we should have seen it as well, because it was like him turning out and saying, I'm scared, I need help.
The alleged offence that Ryan was remanded for was robbing a phone and money, I think. He said, I'm going to prison. They're not going to let me come home, they're going to remand me, they're going to remand me.
You could just tell straight away that he wasn't looking forward to prison. He even cried before I even went to prison, saying I don't want to go to prison.
Really frightened, they're going to lock me up.
Ryan was remanded into custody at Wetherby Young Offenders Institution, which houses over 350 inmates aged between 15 and 17.
What did you think when you heard he was going to prison?
He's going to get bullied. He's definitely going to get bullied.
I knew that he'd get bullied because Ryan wasn't a fighter. He was little, very slim, nothing to him. So I was quite worried about Ryan.
Our role is there with protecting him, seeing to his needs and such things. Would he cope? And what would he do if he couldn't cope? How would his emotions surface, knowing what my son wore?
When Jake was sentenced to 4 months at Hindley Young Offenders Institution, it was the first time he'd ever been away from his mum, Liz.
The only present Jake ever had, what he never destroyed. They're like stilts. He could run up this street within seconds with these on. All he saw were a pair of legs going past your window. The only thing he never destroyed. He wouldn't said to me, Mum, can I wash your car down? Yeah. I got no windscreen wipers on them because I were making them better. Just never thought it through to end. I was the only mainstay in his life who could talk him out of what he were doing. If somebody had upset him upstairs, he'd go and smash his bedroom to smithereens. And I mean smash everything. Yeah, I used to say, now, come on, son, tell your mum what's gone off. If you can't tell your mum, you can't tell anybody. Oh, go, mum, go. Now, come on. And we used to, that's how we got round it. Cost me 300 quid these, and the best 300 quid I've ever spent in my life for that kid. I thought Jake could be safe, because he must cater for some sort of mental health issues. But it was horrendous from day one.
Jake had ADHD and learning disabilities, but despite his vulnerability, he wasn't put into one of Hindley's specialist units.
They looked at Jake, assessed him as though he could handle himself. That's wrote down, looked as though he could handle himself, and that's why they put him on the wing he was on, with the sort of people that was on that wing.
He weren't coping at all. They were giving him medication at the wrong time. They were giving him at like 7:30. If you're giving him at 7:30, he don't go to sleep. So he's having no sleep, and then they're getting him up just as he's going to sleep. In the first visit, his tongue was swelled up. It were all like green and pussy and everything. And that was a sign of him being run down. He weren't coping.
He were telling people, different people, how he were being bullied. Witnesses saw how he were being bullied. If he were on phone to me, there'd be somebody effing and blind in the background. Vile, nasty things. And he'd say, oh, there's been a fight, Mum. I'd say, go back to your room, don't put your head down, get it done, you know, don't cause any trouble, or out like that. Huh. Wrong advice.
This was like a week before I got put in prison. It looks like a right tramp. He'd been smoking. And he was sat there and just couldn't stop laughing, so I thought I'd take a picture of it because I thought it was funny. Oh, that's mother baby. Oh, that's cute. You see he's cute there, don't look like a tramp.
Ryan had never been locked up before. They had it down on file that he'd been to a secure placement, but he hadn't. He'd never been to secure.
When he arrived at Wetherby, Ryan's record stated that he'd been banging his head on the police cell wall. But the prison didn't issue a self-harm warning, and he was put straight on the induction wing.
It was wrote down on his file 3 times in the first 2 days, referred to CAMS, which is Child Mental Health Service, and it wasn't picked up. He wasn't referred. He didn't see nobody. They said because he were quiet and because he said he were fine, that he were okay and he were handling it. I'd be asking more questions if someone is quiet.
But 5 days after Ryan arrived, his behaviour changed. He had an argument with a prison officer and threatened to snap her jaw.
In fact, he was upset because it was Mother's Day. He hadn't been able to make contact with his own mum, and he perceived that the officer he was talking to had slagged off his mother. So those 2 things combined in his head to make him go over the top and behave in a very angry and unpleasant way.
His punishment was severe. He was confined to his cell for 7 days. Then he was moved straight onto a main wing. It wasn't long before he was being bullied by other inmates.
Of course he's going to get bullied. He was 17 when he went, and it's like, he didn't look 17. He looked 13, maybe 14. I always remember him being this like little small child, a little spot, little acne face, like Lee's tracksuit, skinny little guy. Were he sentenced?
No.
Remand. You know what I mean? Remand. You shouldn't put a remand with a convict. Prisons are just ruthless. In big man jail, Armley, Hull, you know, a lot more relaxed, far more relaxed. Older men have got wiser head and just want to get on with the sentence, do the sentence, get out. YOs, 15 to 18, and that's 15 to 18 is a pretty rowdy age, you know what I mean? Constant fighting. You're sat down eating your dinner, you look at him and go, what the fuck, what are you looking at? You know what I mean? And it's like, if you put your head down like that, you have just more or less said, come back at me. Bullying's a big thing in jail. That's because it's all young fellas thinking they're right or trying to prove a point. He was a small, quiet kid. He knows what a grass is and he knows what happens to grasses and he knows what happens to people who go running to screws. He's thought, how else can I deal with this?
Ryan had a relative who was also serving time at Wetherby. He was being bullied too and tried to hang himself in a desperate attempt to be moved to the Keppel unit, a wing for vulnerable prisoners. For Ryan, though, the bullying wasn't over, and on the 17th of April, it got worse.
They'd been taunting him through the window that night, threatening to go in next morning and stab him. And I think Ryan wanted to go to Keppel.
That night, after lockup, Ryan decided to copy his relative.
That young relative, if you like, had the sense to ring the bell before doing what he did. And somebody had come and he'd been taken to hospital and then he was moved to Keppel. But when Ryan did it, he apparently called out to those on cells either side of him, ring your bell, let's string up. And he then, it appears, did string up.
And that boy didn't press his bell.
The youngster told the prison, I couldn't ring the bell because I was in trouble for ringing the bell before unnecessarily, and I thought if I did it, I'd lose my television. So nobody rang any bell at all. And the outcome for Ryan was that he died.
you think Ryan may have done what he did out here?
No. No. Not all. He'd have done it a long time ago if he were gonna. He's had threats before. He must have really, really desperately wanted to get off that win and really thought that something was gonna happen that next day.
Love changes everything, doesn't it? I really believed that right through until, well, probably right up until the day he died. I always believed, part of me either hoped or believed that Adam was going to come good.
At 17, Adam was living on his own, away from his parents.
We could go a few weeks without hearing from Adam. Unfortunately, sometimes that was, oh, Mum, I'm in this prison or that prison. He was at a hostel called Llewellyn in Newtown. The staff there knew more about Adam and what was happening to him than we did. And they were his second family. I really believe that. That's Llewellyn.
We all felt a lot for Adam. We all tried very hard to help him get what he wanted out of life. Unfortunately, we didn't sort of find the answer for Adam. Adam was always in trouble of some sort. Very petty crimes, generally, things like shoplifting.
Over the next few years, Adam served over 10 short prison sentences, all for minor crimes.
He'd come and knock on the door, and we'd have a cup of tea and a chat, and then he'd be gone for weeks, and then he'd come back again, and we'd say, where have you been? I said, I've been to prison. Again, yeah. So we never really knew what was going on, but I've known him since primary school. Leading up to his final term in prison, he kind of got in a funny way. He had 10 pills which he was trying to sell. He was trying to get rid of them. He couldn't get rid of them. So he crushed them all up into a powder and was just dabbing.
His life became extremely chaotic. Worse than I'd ever seen in the past.
His eyes were sunken in over the few days because he wasn't getting to sleep. And I don't imagine he was eating either.
It wasn't the Adam I recognised, because the Adam I knew I could speak to. This guy was almost sitting there blank.
He stole a few phones as well, mobile phones. He had like 3 at once. And then he went out and stole another one and got caught.
The sergeant, who knew Adam very well, knew that he was not right when they'd got him in custody. His behaviour in the holding cell at court, it was very worrying for the solicitor. He smeared feces all over the cell wall. The solicitor asked for him to be assessed by the community psychiatric nurse. The community psychiatric nurse saw him, and although Adam maintained he was perfectly all right, had no plans to commit suicide, the psychiatric nurse felt otherwise and actually made that recommendation on his report that if the magistrate sent him back to prison, he was at risk of taking his own life. But they still sent him back to prison. That psychiatric report didn't go with him. And when it was faxed to the prison the following day, our information is that it was filed, that nobody even read it. Nobody joined anything up.
No one raised any concerns about Adam's state of mind when he arrived at Brinsford Young Offenders Institution. He was fast-tracked through induction, and on the second day of his sentence, he was moved to a single cell containing bunk beds. That evening, Adam hanged himself from the top bunk.
Not sure I would have predicted that, looking at the video of him as a little boy. Yeah.
This is Jake's perfect role. What the fuck are you on about?
Bless him.
Luminous jumper.
I don't know what they're doing in the mushing.
Look, nice chips.
That was Jake. That was Jake, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was just Jake on a typical day. It's nice to watch just because they were happy then, really. Hi, Samantha. I'm sorry I didn't write to you. You're the best sister in the world. I didn't mean to call you a fat bastard. So, Samantha, I love you so, so much. See you when I get out. P.S. Love you, Lily, Samantha and Carl.
He shouldn't have been there. He didn't deserve to be there and get bullied.
Is he an easy target, do you think, to be bullied?
Yeah.
He always got bullied, didn't he?
Oh,
always. Because he was vulnerable, because people knew that Jake were an emotional person. But they also, a lot of people thought, well, he's a big, tough lad, he can take it, you know what I mean? But he couldn't.
After 4 weeks in prison, Jake was back in court to answer his second charge, for affray. He was sentenced to another 6 months. His youth offending officer reported that he was being bullied at Hindley. She requested a transfer, but Jake was sent straight back there.
My last words to him, because he was sat behind a glass panel, were, "Don't cry, son, don't cry." And they sent him back to Hindley. On the Tuesday, he smashed his telly to smithereens because of bullying, and his scrot tore down his arm.
Jake was given more support, but despite self-harming, he wasn't moved to Hindley's specialist unit.
Why didn't they put him up below unit, which caters for mental health, for people who were threatening and tried to commit suicide? 24-hour care, suicide watch. But it wasn't deemed necessary.
Over the next couple of days, Jake's mood worsened.
He segregated himself off in his cell and didn't come out for food, didn't come out for association, just sat in his cell all the time. Something kicked off on Friday, and they were all crowded round his cell. Kicking his door, calling him meth boy, throwing piss at him, telling him he's got to go and fucking shag this young kid, telling him they're gonna fuck my mum, telling him they're gonna fuck his girlfriend.
CCTV recorded inmates kicking and hitting Jake's cell door with table tennis bats.
The prison officer just sat letting it all happen, never said, don't do it.
He was bullied that much, I think he was tortured. His mind was tortured. Nobody helped him. Nobody helped him at all. Yet he was crying out for help.
Later that night, a prison officer saw Jake writing at his desk. The cell light was on. The officer returned 30 minutes later to find the cell in darkness. He shone his torch into the cell and saw Jake hanging from the window. Prison officers cut him down and began to resuscitate him.
They keep giving me shit. I told staff and they did not do anything about it. So, Mum, if you're reading this, I'm not alive, because I can't cope with it in prison no more. People giving me shit, even staff. I'm sorry, because Lily's not even going to know her Uncle Jake. So, Lily, I'm always be looking over you. You are my baby. I could never have. It's horrible. To think my brother had fought or something so drastic to try and get out, and
nobody listened to him. He didn't have anybody to help him and say, Jake, it's all right. Because no one gave a fuck, did they?
No. I found out 11:15, Friday, 20th of January. We were just going upstairs. I'd just go in my bedroom, just getting dressed, putting my pyjamas on, and there was a bang on the door. Our Samantha flew downstairs to answer the door. She says, Mum, police is here. I went, they've come to the wrong house. Put my trousers on, I went downstairs and, is your son in Hindley? I went, yeah. He says, he's dead, though, he's just hung himself. I says, I beg your pardon. I said, I think you better come in.
It's horrible. They were like, your son's tried hanging himself, he's done it. At the minute, he's breathing.
I thought my legs were going to go from underneath me. Couldn't believe it to start with.
Horrible, really horrible. Then we all had to like scramble to my dad's and get my dad, and then drove up there.
This nurse says, go into the family room, and I said to Gary, when you go into family room, it's bad. And then a consultant come out and told us he ran a life support machine.
It was just two like prison officers sat at the end of my brother's bed, like he was going to get up and fucking run away or something. I just sat there watching him.
Later on that morning, they took him down for a scan, and he came back and he says, I thought I'm going to tell you we're going to die. He says, but I can see a little bit of hope, just a little bit. That was Saturday morning. And Sunday, they should have took him for another scan. But there was no hope then.
Distraught. Mum was in a bad, bad way.
And I sat and held his hand. I ran one side, and Gary ran on the other side. And she just turned his machine off. He died.
This report considers the circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Adam Rushton at Her Majesty's Young Offenders Institute, Brinsford, on the 22nd of October 2009. Adam was found hanging in his cell shortly after 6 p.m. He was 20 years old. The mortuary experience was a bit surreal. I wasn't sure what to expect after all. Adam had hung himself, and I don't think that would be very nice. And they said, well, he probably will seem as though he's just asleep. And he was just there. Couldn't see his neck. And I felt quite cross with him for being such a silly boy. And he was cold. And that's where we said goodbye to our son. And then we went to the prison. They asked if we'd like to see where he died, and I said, no, thank you, I don't want to see where he hung himself. And the governor said, oh, you'll be very pleased to know. I'm going to be pleased to know what? Well, Adam had hung himself from the top of a set of bunk beds. He said, you'll be really pleased to know that we've now moved the bunk beds out of there as a result of Adam's death. We wouldn't want it to happen, or wouldn't want it to happen again, or something like that. And then, as time went by, the run-up to the inquest, it became apparent that another young man had died in the same cell, in the same way, from the same bunk bed. I couldn't believe it. And not only that, it became apparent that cells used for single occupancy should not have bunk beds in them. And on the Monday before my son killed himself, emails were going between the prison governor and the estates manager saying, how much time will it take to have the bunk bed removed and how much will it cost? Should we have to do it? Well, it cost my son his life. If the bunk beds had been moved, maybe he wouldn't be dead now. It feels like nobody really gives a damn, to be honest. Nobody really cares.
no, no, no. You're a carrier of the light inside of you.
Well, a guy came down and took pictures of everybody and graffitied him. That's Samantha. That's Jake. You can see his face better.
Spend a lot of time down here with Jake.
All the time.
All the time.
When he died, that's where they put messages for him all down here and left flowers and notes
Yeah,
and
all
stuff.
up back of there.
How's your mum coping with it?
Rubbish. She puts on a brave face most of the time, doesn't she?
She does.
Rubbish. She just feels like she's existing and not living.
Because she lived for you, but because of Jake's problems, she lived for Jake, didn't she? In her life, for looking after Jake and making sure Jake were all right, because you could sort yourself out, couldn't you?
Exactly. She needed him and he needed her. They both kept each other going, whereas now, all she does is sits inside all the time. It's hard to see my mum go down and like that.
After every death in prison, an inquest is held. Jake's is expected to last for 6 weeks.
There's loads and loads and loads of paperwork. Mountains of the stuff.
When did it arrive?
Monday, we went and fetched it from post office on Monday. There's bits and bobs coming through every day. Now it's coming up closer to inquest. There's paperwork from coroner, there's paperwork from solicitor, there's paperwork from safeguarding children. There's paperwork from everywhere. It's very overwhelming. His autopsy report, how many scratches he'd got in his body, what were in his bowel. They had to take his brain out of his body to do some tests on it. How they undid his skull and his brain popped through it. It's horrendous having to read things like that. I'm stressing out about the inquest. It's frightening me. It's overwhelming me. I don't want to be sat there all this crying. I want to be strong for him, but I know I won't be able to be. I am strong. Through the day. It's at night time. Can't sleep at night. And I dream about him every night. Once it's all over and done with, I might be able to get some peace.
The inquest into Ryan's death has been underway for several weeks.
No, can't be playing with the ball now. Go on into bed. First day was the hardest day. It's really hard being on that stand. I was made to go through all Ryan's letters and listen to phone calls. You feel like you're there giving evidence, but you do in a way feel like you're on trial. Very, very hard. I thought over 2.5 years, I'd built myself up. I'd been knocked down with the death. You start to pick yourself up. I actually said I'm prepared. I'm not going to let it get me down. I know what to expect. I've read all paperwork, I've read all statements. And then, I think 3 weeks in, boom, that's when it hit me. And I had to start having days off because I couldn't cope.
We'll have this little bit of evidence that's left, and then the coroner will start her summing up and probably go on for 2 days.
Yeah.
Yes, because there's an awful lot for her to say. What's likely to happen is that the jury will come back and give what they call the short form verdict. Suicide, accident or misadventure, I'll explain those, or an open verdict.
I just don't want it to come back suicide because I don't believe it was suicide. Not full suicide. No. No. So as long as that don't come back, I'll be all right. Yeah.
I don't think that the verdict should be suicide, and I know Sonia would hate it if it was. I mean, it would be dreadful for her to feel that Ryan was so depressed and so lacking in hope for the rest of his life that he wanted to end it. I think it's terribly important for Sonia not to be faced with that kind of a conclusion.
The grief is really hard to explain. With me, more so, because we ended on a bad note. I must have received, I think it was about 7 letters within the space of a week and a half, begging me to go and see him. I don't visit my children in prison. To me, if they'd done wrong, they were in there for punishment. I didn't answer a lot of his calls, but when I did talk to him, I was harsh, very. I heard it back at the inquest, the phone call, and it hurt me more because I felt I sounded nasty. Just no emotion there. It was just, why have you done this? I'm not going to lie for you. Things like that. And that's how it ended with me and Ryan, on that bad note. That's made it worse for me, because I wasn't able to tell him how I felt. I was just angry with him. And I can't change that now.
Jake's inquest started today, and I'm in a hotel room waiting for tomorrow for me to be the first witness. I'm happy in some ways because I want to tell the jury my son wasn't a bad lad. He wasn't a naughty boy, he wasn't a bad lad, he was ill.
And what are you not looking forward to?
The old posh and the old solicitors, the barristers. And I just come from a council estate from Chesterfield. They don't know how we live, they don't know how anybody lives. It's not something you do every day. I should be sat at home now watching Coronation Street, or something like that. When my son died, I had to take his socks off. And these socks have been everywhere with me. I know it sounds silly. I still smell him, but I take his socks everywhere with me. Wherever I go, these socks go.
How do you think it will be like over the next 4 to 6 weeks?
Horrendous. People talking about Jake, people talking about what sort of background he came from, because they'll try and blacken our names as well, even though we've done nothing wrong. He didn't die in the care of me. He died in the care of the state.
The jury in Ryan's inquest has been sent out to consider its verdict.
Been waiting now a week today for the verdict to come in. Wasn't too bad last week. I think towards the end of the week it's got worse. I thought they'd be back by Friday, they weren't back by Friday. I spent most of the weekend crying. Tired. Really tired.
And how are you going to feel if it comes back suicide?
I don't think I could handle that. That'd take longer to get over. Because I won't accept that. I will not accept that it was suicide. You don't take note, really, of suicides that are going on in prison. The public's reaction. It's their own fault. Shouldn't have been in prison in the first place. I've heard it. I've probably thought it myself before, if I'm honest. They just look at that as a thug, another thug. But that thug, as they call it, is still a child. Some of them have made mistakes. We all make mistakes. Some have made more than others. They're still children. Right, it's Ruth. They have a verdict, but don't panic. They have gone for lunch whilst everything is being typed. Ah, yeah, they've got a verdict. Got a verdict.
You have?
Checking them.
Making me nervous, I'm not even going.
shaking inside. I've got butterflies. It's like, you can't wait for it to come, and then when it's here, you want it to be a bit longer.
What's the verdict?
Accidental. Due to the bullying.
I think, I mean, I'm looking at it and absorbing it just as you are, but there's some really, really positive things here. Missed opportunities to see how vulnerable Ryan was, and then the fact that the jury recognised this was a cry for help. He never wanted to leave any of you or anything like that.
I knew he didn't mean to do it. I knew he didn't mean to do it. I think that's what I needed. Somebody to agree.
Ryan was one of 11 young people who killed themselves in young offender institutions in 2011. One of the recommendations made to Wetherby to prevent future deaths was to improve mental health assessments. Another was to challenge bullying more effectively.
When I was told its recommendations, I was quite angry, because I was told that even if they do just one recommendation out of 6, they've made a change. But how many inquests has there been now for deaths in children's prisons? All recommendations? It's still happening. It's still happening.
It's been a long, long time since I've memorized your face. It's been 4 hours now since I've wandered through your place. I do.
It took us a long time to choose the right spot. That's all that's left of my poor lad.
Yeah, you get all these inquests, reports, and it's supposed to explain what happened. But I'm not sure it does, really. Maybe nothing can. It shouldn't have happened. He should still be here, causing havoc and mayhem. But he isn't, so...
When I used to visit prison, I would look around the room and I would see 30 or 40 Adams, all with the same look in their eyes, all with the same expressions on their faces. And, yeah, they deserve to be punished, but there should be something a bit more for them.
The inquest into Jake Hardy's death in Hindley Young Offenders Institution has just finished after 6 weeks.
On the 20th of January 2012, at 21:11 hours, in cell F1, Jake Hardy died as a result of his own deliberate act, but the evidence does not establish beyond reasonable doubt whether he intended that act to cause his death. At the inquest, we found out that on the 20th, that night, he should have been moved to a safer cell.
And why wasn't he moved?
I've no idea. 12 failings. 12 times he could have saved his life. But nobody did. A failure to provide him with adequate personal officer support and monitoring. A failure adequately to record and consider reports of previous self-harm and thoughts of self-harm and suicide. A failure to review the level of his risk of self-harm. A failure to investigate reports that he was being verbally abused. A failure to protect him from the negative behaviour of other young persons towards him. A failure to investigate reports.
2 months ago, the government announced a review into the self-inflicted deaths in prison of young people aged 18 to 24. The findings will be published in a year's time.